Okay, well, good morning and welcome to this first session for Town and Parish Council training. My name's Jennifer Rice. I'm the comms analyst for the fund, and today we'll be going over, excuse me, some of the topics that you asked us to do a little bit of extra training on. So, what are we covering in the first session here today? We're going to start with employer discretions, just going over what they are and how you use them. Then we're going to move on to retirements and financial strains with the hope that we can help you identify in advance the kind of scenarios where a financial strain is likely to be payable. And then finally, we'll finish up with a look at ill health retirement. We're also going to, within that, we'll look at tier 3 retirement, which does trip some people up when it comes to reviewing and ceasing those pensions, and also touching on how to handle ill health retirement for former employees. So let's get started with employer discretions. So what are they? Well, basically, employer discretions are a set of rules that give you a bit more flexibility on how you want to handle some issues with your employees who are also members of the pension scheme. Now, usually these employer discretions revolve around enhancing or accessing pension benefits. So there are a set of mandatory discretions that you have to have a policy on, and there are also non-mandatory discretions. So the mandatory discretions cover things like flexible retirement. So you do need a policy around this. When will you permit flexible retirement? How many hours or how much of a grade drop do you require someone to accept in order to be eligible? They also cover things like when you'll be willing to waive early retirement reductions for members as they leave, and when you would consider awarding extra pension to employees, or whether you'd be willing to contribute towards the cost of buying extra pension. The non-mandatory discretions, we still strongly recommend that you have a policy on. They cover things like late transfers into the scheme. So if somebody, normally there is 12 months from joining, where a member can freely transfer in any other pensions they have. But we're quite used to the idea that people forget that they have little pensions elsewhere. So they might come to you a year or so into their employment and go, oh, could I transfer this pension in? So it's ideal that you have a policy to sort of say whether you will consider that or not. But there is a whole bunch of them. There aren't that many mandatory discretions. There are more non-mandatory ones, and we do have a document that we can share with you which details exactly what they are. And I will circulate that in an email later. So how do you use, so when are they used? When are employer discretions used? Basically, you only have to use them if a member or employee asks you to. So they will approach you and say, I would like to be able to transfer in a pension late, or I am leaving, I'm not yet at state pension age. Would you consider waiving my early retirement reductions? So you don't necessarily have to approach the member, they will come to you and ask for them. Now, I did say you do have to have your discretions policy published. So why is that? Well, first off, because it is actually part of the regulations, you are required to have your policy published in advance. But you should really want to have a policy on your employer discretions because it just gives that much more clarity, not only to your employees, but also to us here at the pension fund and to yourselves about exactly how you will go about making that decision if someone comes to you and asks you to exercise a discretion. So you don't have to think on the fly, it's already laid out. You can be confident that you are taking the correct steps to come to a decision. It also gives confidence to everyone that anyone who is asking you to exercise the discretion will be treated equally and fairly, because they can see in advance how you're going to make the decision and what grounds you are going to consider. So it just builds confidence that in the transparency of the process and how the decision is going to be made. The reason we say you do need it published in advance rather than just picking it up on the fly as someone comes to you with a request is because if you're doing that, there is a very good chance that the individual in front of you is going to influence what decision you come to, your relationship, how long they've been in the scheme, things like that. And you may be more or less likely to agree to their proposal, but that could then set a precedent for other employees further down the line who then ask you, and that might not actually be the correct decision for your organization to make in the future. If you get your policy set up before anyone comes to you with a request, it just makes sure you've taken the emotion out of it and that you are actually looking at things from a slightly more rational viewpoint, and you can see both how it's going to benefit the scheme members, but also how it's going to benefit yourselves as employers. So you can strike that balance. So, what are the implications of exercising these discretions? Usually, they will trigger a cost to you, the employer. So that might be a financial strain. It might be that it could potentially cost you more down the line. So again, things like if you agree to waive early retirement reductions for somebody who's retiring, that will trigger a financial strain that you have to pay. However, if you agree to allow someone to transfer in a pension late, there is no immediate cost to you. However, what it would do is increase the size of that pension. And then if down the line you made that person's position redundant, you would have to pay a financial strain to have that pension paid. And that financial strain will be larger because the pension is larger. So there are things to consider, but usually they come with a cost. So the main thing to reiterate to you guys is if you are agreeing to exercise a employer discretion for one of the retirement ones, so that's usually waiving early retirement reductions or switching on the 85-year rule early. Please do not tick yes to agree to do those on your leaver forms, on the retirement forms, unless you are prepared to pay a financial strain. Once you have ticked it, there's very little we can do to unpick that situation. So only tick yes on those things if you are actually committed to agreeing to to exercising those discretions and paying the subsequent strain. Again, if you're going through those and you're thinking, am I switching on the 85-year rule? Am I waiving early retirement reductions? First question, has the employee asked you to do any of those things? If they haven't asked you, then the answer is no, you're not going to switch those on. So just keep it in mind, it's not just a box ticking exercise when you're filling in the paperwork. Read, consider, and only action if you are prepared for the consequences. That said, if you are considering, so if someone does come to you and say, hey, could you waive these early retirement reductions or switch on the 85-year rule early, and you're inclined to say, yes, you think there might be some grounds that would let you do that, you can come to us and request an estimate. We'll tell you, firstly, if there is a financial strain, and then secondly, how much that's likely to be. So that can help you with your decision-making process. If you have agreed to exercise the discretion, we do send you a letter after the employee has retired and we've brought their pension into payment. We then send you a letter saying, yep, this is how much the financial strain actually was. And then separately, we send you an invoice. So we will invoice you for the amount. Don't worry when you receive the letter, that's just for information for your reference. So what are your responsibilities as an employer? So you need to establish a policy, a discretions policy, and you need to on all the mandatory discretions, and we still strongly recommend that you also do it for the non-mandatory ones. And you do have to keep it under review. And you also have to publish it. So we recommend reviewing roughly every 3 years or so, but not necessarily that you're going to make any changes every 3 years, but that you have reviewed it to make sure that what you've agreed to is still what works best for your organisation and is still how you would like to operate. In terms of publishing the policy, it does have to be accessible to employees and former employees. So it's usually placed on an intranet or website, but it can be as simple as making it accessible in a break room. So putting it on a notice board, but in other ways, just as long as people can access it, that they're aware that it's there, that's up to you how you'd like to do that. So when you actually formulate your discretions policy, there are a couple of things that you do need to do. Firstly, you have to avoid setting policies that could lead to a loss of confidence. So really, in those terms, it's just making sure you understand what the discretion is designed to do. So the example here is about flexible retirement. Now, the intention behind flexible retirement is to help ease someone into retirement. You're helping to reduce their workload, take some of the load off their shoulders. So they either reduce their working hours or they move to a less senior role, and in return, they have their pension brought into payment to help sort of offset that loss of salary, to help ease them towards retirement. So if you're only reducing it by 1 hour a week, because you guys set how many hours they need to reduce their work schedule by, is that really enacting the intention of the policy? Possibly not. So just things like that, understanding what the intention is behind the discretions, and that will help lead you to design a discretion that would work best for you. Of course, you do need to make sure that the policies are workable, and affordable and reasonable. And obviously can't discriminate against anybody, but also you want to make sure that it's not overly fetid, or so you don't want ones that are just a blanket, no, we will never do that. You can say stuff like, it will usually be a no, but you need to allow for exceptional circumstances and have an idea of what those exceptional circumstances might look like. And then, of course, how you would make a decision. So if someone came to you with exceptional circumstances, how would you then make that decision? Would there be a business case? Would it be reviewed? Who would it be reviewed by? Things like that. And again, just keep the policy under regular review. It doesn't specify exactly how long. We recommend 3 years, but it is down to you. But just make sure if anything changes, that your policies are still up to date for what you would want to do for your organisation. So where do we come into it as Essex Pension Fund? Sadly, we can't set your discretions for you. We can help you, and we'll give you information about how discretions work and help clarify any questions you've got. But we can't write it for you. And you have to provide a copy of the discretions policy to us. We keep it saved and archived. We don't approve it or anything like that, but you do need to publish your policy for your employees to find, I think, at least a month before you intend to use it. And as I said, we are ultimately on hand to answer your questions and clarify any particular issues. We have a template that you can use. It's not a copy and paste, because obviously discretions that might work for a county council or for a school or academy may not work for a town or parish council. But starting with a blank piece of paper is always a nightmare. So we do have a template. If you would like a copy, if you are currently reviewing your discretions policy and have any questions, please contact the technical team. That's just pensions.technical@essex.gov.uk. They will answer any of your questions and be able to help you with providing guidance and forms and assistance. So that's it from employer discretions. So I hope that was useful. I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to pass this over to Oliver Murray. Let me just see. Let me stop sharing.
Yep. Thank you, Jen.
No problem.
Mate, let me just. There you go. Right. Can everybody see that? Can you see that, Jen?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. My name's Oliver Murray. I'm the retirement team manager here at the Essex Pension Fund. I've been working for the Essex Pension Fund for nearly 15 years now, and I've been the retirement team manager for 2. Myself and Dan are just going to speak to you briefly for around 15 minutes about retirements and financial strains. I'm going to be predominantly talking about when a financial strain comes into effect. So, when would a financial strain be payable? As Jen has covered in the last topic with employer discretions, when you apply an employer discretion, such as waiving retirement reductions or turn on the 85-year rule, there could be a financial strain to pay for this, because you're effectively taking away any reductions that would apply if the member left voluntarily. This is also the same for a redundancy or business efficiency, because under the regulations, we cannot reduce their pension if they're over 55 or less than normal pension age, which is in line with SPA. There'll be no reductions to these, so therefore you have to bear the cost because of that. With flexible retirements, there may also be a strain. This is due to the fact that the rule of 85 is automatically switched on if a member leaves between the ages of 55 and 59. To make sure you know that whether there's going to be a financial strain or not, it's always best to request an estimate from ourselves. All you need to do this is fill in an EPF 111 estimate request form. All you need to do on this is supply us with the date of leave, reason for leaving, the whole time equivalent for the last 365 days, if they've got pre-2008 membership, and 2014 membership, sorry, and also the projected actual pay from the 1st of April of the year leaving to the date of leave. If all then goes ahead and there is a financial strain to pay once the member retires, we will send you a letter once we've calculated the member's benefits, which will confirm the actual cost of the financial strain that you have to pay. And then shortly after this, you should receive an invoice from us on how to pay it. So why is a financial strain payable? Again, when you're obviously applying the employer discretions, such as waiving the early retirement reductions, because you're taking them reductions away, you have to bear the cost of this. And that is obviously the same for redundancies, etc., as I did cover in the last slide. So, which types of retirement can trigger a financial strain? We've touched on them all really, which is redundancy, business efficiency, when the member is age 55 plus. You might want to make a note that this is changing from the 1st of April 2028 to 57. An early retirement, if of course you switch on the 85-year rule, again, you'd only do this if the member requests you to do it. And also if you waive all of the early retirement reductions. Flexible retirements, we've also touched on. Again, the 85-year rule is switched on automatically, so there could be a reduction if they're leaving between 55 and 59. And obviously, again, waiving all of the early retirement reductions will create a financial strain. Which types of retirement cannot trigger a financial strain? Well, there's voluntary retirement, so the member's age 55, over 55, decides to leave, and they take all the reductions on their pension benefits if there are any, then there will be no strain for you to pay. Also, ill health, active and deferred members can retire on ill health grounds at any age, and there is no financial strain to pay. However, this may impact on your contribution rate. I'm now going to pass to my colleague Dan, so thank you for listening, and he's actually going to go through ill health retirements.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everyone. So as already said, my name's Dan Chessel. I'm the head of the Funds Administration and Operations. There's about 35 of us or so that work on the administration team, and you're always welcome to give any of us a call, and we'll give you a hand with any questions that you might need answered. So yeah, I'll talk through some information about the deferreds, the deferred ill health and also the active ill health, but I'll start with the actives. So if you don't know, there is provision in the regulations for scheme members to have their benefits put into payment on the grounds of ill health. So this could be anything from upsetting things such as cancer to trips, falls that have an impact on people's physical health, mental health, etc. So there is provision there for ill health retirements, which is a real benefit of the scheme. Now, with active members going on the grounds of ill health, if you do decide to retire them and make that decision, there isn't a financial strain. So what he's just spoken to you about when there is a financial strain, well, with ill health retirements, there is not a financial strain. In terms of the costs of the process, in terms of assessing the individual, cost and your budget cannot come into it at all. It really, in terms of when you're making a decision, it really does have to come down to the scheme member and how fit or not they actually are. So how do you do that? Well, before you can make a decision, you really want as much information as possible. And in order to get that information, you must obtain the opinion of an independent registered medical practitioner. Now, that's quite a mouthful, so we say IRMP for short, and that's probably what I'll likely refer to them as these slides go on. So what they will do is you'll arrange for an appointment for them and put them in touch with an IRMP. The IRMP will then make an assessment and decide whether or not, or give their opinion on whether or not they satisfy the criteria for an ill health retirement. They won't make the decision. That will be down to you. We don't have in the fund a list of approved independent registered medical practitioners. That will be down to you to decide. But if you wish to let us know who that IRMP is for future reference, then please feel free to make us aware of that. So in order for a scheme member to be eligible for an ill health retirement, an active scheme member, they must have at least 2 years membership within a local government pension scheme. And that's something we also, a bit of a mouthful, we refer to as the LGPS. If they've got less than 2 years, then a refund would be payable, but more than 2 years, they're deemed to be a member with membership, and then we can look to calculate an ill health pension if it indeed that you give us the instruction to do so. There is no minimum age, so somebody in their teens, hopefully that never happens. Someone in their 20s, 30s, that does happen, unfortunately, can retire on the grounds of ill health. However, they must be under normal pension age. And as Ollie mentioned before, excuse me, normal pension age is linked to the state retirement pension age, so as per the government and getting your state pension. Now that varies from person to person, but invariably is from say 65 up to about 68 at the moment, but who knows where that's going to go. That may go on to 69, 70 and what have you over the years to come. We don't know that yet. So there are 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3, and they all have various levels of enhancement. So I'll start with tier 3. Tier 3, essentially, the member, in order to qualify for this, the member is likely to be capable of going into gainful employment within 3 years of leaving, or normal pension age if earlier. And it's worth highlighting that gainful employment means if you're not aware of a minimum of 30 hours a week for 52 weeks of the year. Tier 2 is unlikely that the member is capable of gainful employment, so the 30 hours a week for 52 weeks of the year within 3 years, but is likely to be capable of gainful employment before they reach their normal pension age. And tier 1, the member is unlikely to be capable of gainful employment at all, to be honest, up to their normal pension age. So as you would expect, is there's 3 tiers. They come with various levels of enhancement. And again, I'll start off with tier 3. So the member would have joined the local government pension scheme. They would have gone through the process. You would have arranged for them to see the IRMP. The IRMP would have given you their opinion. You've made the decision that they can go on the grounds of ill health on a tier 3. Now they can leave on the leaving date. They can retire on the leaving date, but and take their pension unreduced from that date or from the day after leaving. But there won't be any enhancement at all. It is deemed a short-term pension, payable for a maximum of 3 years, and it will stop after 3 years. Tier 2 is a slightly more serious, or deemed slightly more serious and impactful injury or diagnosis, and they will have their pension paid from the date of joining up to their retirement date. But we would also calculate 25% of the pension that they would have accrued had they carried on working from their date of retirement up to normal pension age. Now it's worth noting that we calculate that 25% enhancement based on the contract that they was on immediately before their retirement. So it's in essence immediate with regards to their pay. If there is no pay because they've been on sick leave, for example, then we would use what's called assumed pensionable pay. And that is something that you as an employer would provide us with to allow us to make those calculations. And a tier 1, that's the most severe of all. And similar to tier 2, they'll take it from the date of retirement, but actually instead of 25% enhancement, we would enhance it up by 100% from date of retirement to their normal pension age. So God forbid, if someone is in their 20s or 30s, they would have a huge enhancement applied to their pension. So in terms of tier 1s and tier 2s, that's probably all I'm going to talk about. But tier 3s, as Jen mentioned earlier, is where it's slightly more complicated and where we find that employers do need a bit more guidance and help and support. And that's what we're always here to offer. So after 18 months, the IRMP must be contacted, as must the scheme member, and a review must take place. That's in accordance with the regulations. Much like at the beginning of the retirement process, the IRMP will make a recommendation to you, and it's up to you to make a decision as to whether you agree with that or whether you don't, and whether you actually action whatever it is that the decision or sorry, the information is that's come from the IRMP. Now, if the IRMP deems that after 18 months that the condition is improved and actually they can get gainful employment, or they're already in gainful employment, then the pension must cease. And you must inform us in the fund in writing that the pension must cease. And then we will do that. You must contact the scheme member as well, but we will also contact the scheme member after first ceasing that payment of the pension. And I think I've touched on that last point on there, so I'm quite happy with that. But feel free, I can't see the chat, but feel free, as and when we're talking, to drop any questions in the chat box, and then we can answer them as we go along. If after the 18-month review, the IRMP actually feels that the condition has got worse, and the likelihood of gainful employment is diminished, then they can suggest and give an opinion that you can uplift the tier 3 pension to a tier 2 pension. Now, what that would mean is you would make the decision, presumably, or possibly to go with the opinion of the IRMP. You would make us aware in the fund to uplift the pension to a tier 2. We would do the calculations here in the fund. We would essentially go back to the retirement date, calculate what the enhancement would be from the date of retirement to their normal pension age, and then we would arrange to get in touch with a scheme member, understand if they've had any other benefits or anything put into payment since they retired originally, and then we would make that adjustment to the pension and pay them the higher pension. The benefit of that, of course, is that it won't cease 18 months later. There will be no cease date. Essentially, the cease date will be when they die. I think I've touched on some of these points, but you can see there, after 3 years, the pension must cease or be uplifted to a tier 2. So much like the 18-month review, you have a choice to carry on or to uplift to a tier 2 or to cease. Well, at the 3-year point, you cannot carry on making payment of that pension. It has to cease or be uplifted to a tier 2. Now, we know it has to cease after 3 years. You know it has to cease after 3 years, but we cannot cease that as a fund until we receive written instruction from yourself to do so. So it's vitally important that after 3 years, if it's not being uplifted to a tier 2, that you write to us to confirm that we must cease payment of that pension. It's advisable that you contact the scheme member as well to let them know, but we too will do that as well. And once we have ceased it, if indeed it does cease, then essentially they will receive what we call deferred benefit, which will be essentially, we would look after that until they reach retirement age. And a deferred benefit, just in case you're not aware, I'll touch on that, is somebody that has joined the scheme. They've then left the scheme before normal retirement age, or before any retirement age, before 55 in this case, and they don't transfer it out. And we essentially look after that until such time as they decide to transfer out, have their benefits put into payment, or sadly that they die. As I mentioned before, the employer must contact the member to arrange for the reviews to be conducted and inform us of their decisions. Slightly different on deferred members. Deferred members can apply to the former employer to request that their pension be put into payment on the grounds of ill health. Generally speaking, they contact us as a rule of thumb. They don't have to, but they tend to. They tend to be the first port. We tend to be their first port of call. We would explain to them the process that they would need to follow, or that they should follow, and the employer or former employer in the deferred member's case should follow. We would contact you on their behalf, essentially. So we would ask them to put in writing to us that their situation and that they would like to be considered for ill health retirement. We would forward that information on to you, and then much like from an active benefit status, active member status, you would just follow the same process, really. So you would contact the IRMP. The IRMP would then have an assessment of the deferred member, and they would give their opinion to you, and then it would be down to you to make the decision. Now, it's more complicated with the changes and the different tranches within the local government pension scheme. So there was changes on the 1st of April 2008, and also changes on the 1st of April 2014. So I won't read these verbatim. Hopefully you can see those on screen and you can see the differing criteria. So I'll just give you a moment just to read those. And if I do move on to the screen, to the next screen too soon, then just bear in mind this is recorded, and as Jen said at the beginning, the slides will be circulated, so don't worry yourself too much. All right. Something that is worth noting as well is that, as I've explained already, from an active scheme member of the scheme, of the local government pension scheme, has the option, or that's probably the wrong choice of word, but has 3 tiers that can be applied to their benefit. Unfortunately, from a deferred member's perspective, there are no tiers. It's either paid or it isn't paid. And if it is paid, it's paid unreduced. And again, there is no financial strain. If it isn't paid, then it will remain deferred with us until such time as they transfer out, wish to have their benefits put into payment, try and request at some point later on as well that they need to have their pension put into payment on the grounds of ill health, or that they die. So they can, if they wish, at a later point, if it's been declined, their original request for ill health pension has been declined, they can at a later point come back and ask you to reconsider. So again, I won't read everything on the screen. You can see that for yourselves. Very important thing there to say that because there is no tiers, there wouldn't be a tier 3, there would be no cessation. The only cessation would be is actually when they die, if it were to be put into payment. So it is paid for life. So that's me done. So Jen, if that's okay, I can pass you back to Jen, and she can just do a quick recap of what we covered today.
Thanks, Dan. So I say we've covered off the employer discretions. Hopefully those are a little bit clearer for you, but obviously if you have any questions, please just email us, or you can pop a question into the chat or Q&A now. And hopefully we've gone through some financial strains to give you an idea of when financial strains are payable, so that you can kind of, when you're starting to think about retiring people, you've kind of got a better idea of what circumstances are likely to trigger a financial strain. And of course, ill health retirement, it is the #1 issue that the LGPS as a whole, so across the entire of England and Wales, ill health retirement is the #1 thing that people complain about. And it's usually down to a lack of confidence in that employers have that they're following the correct process, and that and members being unhappy about leaving work or not getting the tier they want. So as long as communication is clear and that you understand the process, you can really get rid of a lot of those complaints. So again, I know they don't come up very often for you guys, but when they do, it's just important that if you have questions, come back. We're always at the end of the phone or email. You don't need to wait for a training session. Just reach out to us and we'll talk you through the process and answer any questions you might have there. So we got a question coming in. So if anyone, let me have a little look here. Can we have a copy of the slide? Absolutely, yeah, no worries there.
Sorry, Jed, I'm just answering the 85-year-old question in the chat.
Okie doke, no worries. We do get a lot of questions about that also, but Ollie is the resident expert on the topic, so he'll be able to give a good response there. Again, one thing I would say about that is if someone asks you to switch on the 85-year rule early, you're probably not going to know if they qualify for it or not. So again, just you can pop an email to us. You don't need to fill in any forms, and just sort of say, hey, this member, do they qualify for the 85-year rule? Do I need to think about waiving it? And we can give you a steer. So that's all good. Has anyone else got any other questions? You can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Can't see anyone. If, of course, you find you've got questions, I will just share. Will I? I was just going to find the slide with our contact details on just very quickly. I'll pop that up for you guys. Again, if you find you've got questions, like you go away and think about it. I'm terrible for that. I can never think. Someone says, have you got any questions? And I'm like, nope. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh yeah, I meant to ask. So let me just find where the end of that one is. Perfect. And just Where am I sharing? There we are. This is the one. So, we're available by phone. You can email. So this is EPFEvents@essex.gov.uk. If you email that one, if it's not something that me and the comms and compliance team can help you with, we will forward it on to the employer team or the technical hub for you. So you'll always get a response, and you'll get one very swiftly. Try and answer everything within 24 hours, 48 hours if it comes in a little late, or on the weekend, of course. As I say, this session has been recorded, and we're going to pop it up on YouTube a little later. It will be a little later this week, but I will circulate a copy of the slides to everyone. You can also find lots of useful information about the LGPS generally on essexpensionfund.co.uk. You'll find all our forms and fact sheets there, including a copy of the ill health certificates. So should you ever need to go down the ill health retirement route, the documents are all there that you need to pass on to your independent registered medical practitioner. Then there's the National LGPS website, lgpsmember.org. That's where you'll find useful calculators, so things for like buying lost pension, buying back lost pension, buying extra pension. There's also some really useful 90-second videos about how to understand your pension and annual allowance and things like that. So I shall give you some time back, and we shall close this session down. Just a reminder, the second session is a little later this afternoon, and we'll be covering child-related leave, buying extra pension, and be doing an introduction to the new employer hub. So used to be pensions online, but it's had a bit of a facelift. So our colleagues in the support team will be taking you through how to use that system. And then tomorrow we have training session 3, and then we're going to look at how to complete the PN11, going over some of the trickier bits there. We'll be also going over monthly returns, how to complete the M99 reconciliations, and a bit of detail about suspension notices. So hopefully you'll be able to join us later today and tomorrow. But again, all sessions will be recorded, and we will circulate copies of the slides to everyone. So if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to reach out to us. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll see you later.